We are guardians, but also a bunch of miserable wretches that are constantly fighting against dangers and madness. The corridor outside the window was sealed, its walls ice-cold. The room was illuminated with bright yellow lights. Dunn Smith's delivery echoed, sending blow after blow to Klein's heart. It left him temporarily at a loss for words. Dunn shook his head and smiled when he saw Klein silent. Are you very disappointed? Beyonders are not like what you imagine them to be. We are always treading alongside danger. There is always a price to any gain. Klein recovered from his shock as he answered with a quivering voice. It was true that he never imagined that the halo, extraordinariness, and the inordinary aspects of a Beyonder would have such hidden threats. Perhaps it was only because he was hearing a description without witnessing it firsthand and that he had been sucked into the vortex with a peculiar incident already befalling him. Klein soon brought his fear, uneasiness, worry, and apprehension under control. Of course, the thought of shrinking back was inevitable. It lingered around and refused to leave. Not bad. Very mature and rational. Dunn finished the last mouthful of coffee and added. Also, Beyonders are not as powerful as you imagine them to be, especially a low-sequence Beyonder. Why would we use 1 to represent the highest grade and 9 the lowest? Isn't this against intuition and logic? The low sequence we often mention refers to a low grade or a high number. They are the starting point of the sequence chain. All right, where was I? Yes, Beyonders are not as powerful as you imagine. A low-sequence Beyonder's power is no match for guns, much less cannons. They are just more fascinating and indefensible than firearms. If you have a chance to become a Beyonder in the future, you must consider what I said today carefully. Do not make a rash decision. Klein gave a self-deprecating smile. I don't even know when I will have the chance. He felt that he would not miss the opportunity if it presented itself to him. Consuming the wrong potion or a higher-ranked potion in the sequence could be mostly avoided. The major potential danger was the subtle influences the potions had and what he experienced from having heightened auditory and visual perceptions. For the former, he could draw on the experiences from generations of people before him. As long as he was not in a rush to advance himself and patiently grasped control over his powers, the chances of losing control were relatively low. Furthermore, he still had to resolve the potential problem that he currently faced. He had to understand the essence of mysticism and seek a way to transmigrate back. These were the underlying reasons for taking the first step. He did not aim for higher sequence spots. If it was easy to lose control, he could just forget about advancement, stay in his original sequence, and rely on knowledge to plan a way home. It was needless to elaborate on the potential risks. Back when Klein held the luck enhancement ritual, he was nearly driven crazy. The murmurings that nearly blew up his head were still fresh in his mind. They were not unavoidable by not becoming a Beyonder, therefore it was better to gain power that allowed him to defend himself. With this in mind, Klein felt that the pros clearly outweighed the cons. It made his thoughts of withdrawal almost disappear. Dunn picked up his pipe again as his gray eyes carried a smiling trace to them. I cannot give you an accurate answer on this. To become a Beyonder, firstly, you must make enough contributions. Perhaps tomorrow or the day after, you would be able to interpret critical ancient documents. Maybe you would be able to give us valuable ideas for one of our cases? Secondly, it depends on the arrangements of the higher-ups. No one can be sure. All right, I believe you should know quite a bit about Beyonders now. In the future, do not make a rash decision. Now, I'll introduce you to our Nighthawk team's civilian jobs. He stood up and walked to the door. He pointed in the opposite direction of Cheney's gate and said, We have an accountant and someone else who is in charge of procuring necessities and collecting supplies handed out by the church and the police department while standing in as a carriage driver. They are professionals and do not need to take shifts, so they can rest on weekends. The other 3 civilian staff are Roseanne, Brett, and Old Neil. Their jobs include attending to visitors, cleaning the rooms, and writing case files and inventory registration lists. They also guard the armory, storeroom, and the archives, strictly enforcing the registration should someone wish to enter, take out, or return an item. Each of them has 1 day off a week other than Sundays. They negotiate among themselves on the arrangement of night shifts and rest days. So is my job scope the same as Roseanne and the rest? Klein swept away his thoughts about Beyonders and tried to clarify his job responsibilities. No, there's no need. You are a professional, said Dunn with a smile. You currently have 2 tasks. First, every morning or afternoon, go take a stroll outside. Focus on the various streets that lead from Welch's place to yours. What? Klein was dumbfounded. What kind of job is this? Is that very professional? Dunn inserted his hands into the pockets of his black windbreaker and said, After you confirm that you have lost your memories, we will close the case on Welch and Naya. Similarly, that diary of the Antigonus family has vanished completely. We suspect that you brought it with you. You might have hidden it on your way home, which might be why we did not find any clues at your place. This is also likely the reason why you were not there and chose to commit suicide at home. Although you were mysteriously influenced and have forgotten this piece of memory. The human spirit and brain is very fascinating, so there might be residual traces. Daly might not be able to obtain them through her means as a medium, but it does not mean that they do not exist. Perhaps you will feel a sense of déjà vu at a familiar and critical spot. That is what we wish to obtain. Got it. Klein was enlightened. The Nighthawk's deduction of the diary's location was indeed reasonable. He was the only one alive among the people involved. Only he had the time and motive to take the diary away and hide it on his way back. If you can find the diary this way, you will likely made enough of a contribution to become a Beyonder, encouraged Dunn, indirectly revealing the importance of the diary. I hope. Klein nodded. Dunn changed the subject again. Secondly, you get a day off every week. You can decide which day it is for now. When you are not outside, go to our armory and read the literature and canon books. This is a job for a professional historian. When you finish them all, you have to begin taking shifts with old Neil and the rest. All right, no problem. Klein heaved a sigh of relief. This is not something too difficult. At this moment, Dunn turned his body halfway and pointed to the black outward swinging gates that was engraved with 7 sacred emblems. This is Cheney's Gate. It is named after the creator of the modern Nighthawk system, Archbishop Cheney's. There is one under the central cathedral of every major city. It is guarded by formal Nighthawk members on rotation. Inside, there are at least 2 keepers who are sent by the church as well as countless traps. You must not approach it under any circumstance, otherwise, misfortune will befall you. That sounds scary, Klein expressed his feelings. The area inside is divided into a few zones. Stored within are certain potion formulas for certain sequences and other magical materials. It is also used to temporarily hold heretics, mutants, cultists, and members of secret organizations. They will eventually be sent to the Holy Cathedral, introduced Dunn in passing. Holy Cathedral? The headquarters of the Church of the Evernight Goddess located in the Winter County to the north of the kingdom, Cathedral of Serenity? Klein nodded slightly as though he was pondering over the matter. In addition, there are all sorts of classified documents and records inside. When you gain a higher clearance, you might have a chance of reading them. Dunn hesitated for a moment before adding, behind the Cheney's Gate, there are also sealed artifacts in the basement. Sealed artifacts? Klein ruminated on the terms. It sounded like a specialized term. Some of the extraordinary items we gather and retrieve are just too important and magical. If they fall into the wrong hands, it would cause immense destruction. Therefore, we have to keep it strictly confidential and watch them carefully. Even we can only use it under special circumstances. Besides, with that said, Dunn paused for a moment before continuing. Besides, there are some things inside that are very special. They had certain living characteristics which can entice the keepers. It would influence the surroundings, attempt escape, and cause catastrophic outcomes. They have to be strictly controlled. How fascinating, commented Klein wistfully. The Nighthawk headquarters have categorized these sealed artifacts into 4 grades. Grade 0 represents extremely dangerous. They are of the highest importance and of the highest confidentiality. They are not to be inquired, disseminated, described, or spied. They can only be sealed in the basement of the Holy Cathedral, described Dunn in detail. Grade 1 is highly dangerous. They can be used in limited ways. Their security clearance is limited to diocesan bishops or Nighthawk deacons and above. The Central Cathedral of Diocese headquarters like Backlund can store 1 to 2 artifacts. The rest will be handed over to the Holy Cathedral. Grade 2 is dangerous. They can be used with care and moderation. The security clearance requires 1 to be a bishop or a Nighthawk team's captain and above. The central cathedrals in the various cities can store 3 to 5 artifacts. The rest will be turned into the Holy Cathedral or the diocese headquarters. Grade 3 is considerably dangerous. They have to be used carefully. It can only be applied for operations that require 3 or more people. The security clearance requires 1 to be a formal member of the Nighthawks. In the future, you will see the corresponding documents. Through the numbers, you can understand what they represent. For instance, 2 to 125 means that it is a dangerous grade sealed artifact number 125. As Dunn went on, he suddenly turned around and returned to his room. He pulled out a piece of paper from the bottom of the drawer. By the way, take a look at this. 3 years ago, a newly appointed archbishop lost control. For some unknown reason, he stormed through the various levels of protection and vanished mysteriously with a grade 0 sealed artifact. Memorize this photo. If you discover him, do not alert or disturb him. Return to report it immediately, or the chance of you dying in the line of duty is 1,000%. What? Klein received the piece of paper. There was no title on it, just a black and white photo with a few lines of words. In Sanguil. Male. 40 years old. Former archbishop. A gatekeeper who failed in his promotion and was enticed by the devil and was corrupted. He escaped with sealed artifact 0-08. Particular traits are: the picture depicted in Sanguil as wearing an all-black clergyman robe with buttons on both sides and a soft cap. His hair was dark blonde and his pupils were so blue that it was nearly black. He had a high nose and his lips were tightly pursed. His facial features were like a classic sculpture without any wrinkles. The most striking characteristic was that he was blind in one eye. The description of the corrupted is so detailed, but the only thing about the sealed artifact is its code name. Klein honestly offered his first impression. That's why it is at the highest security clearance. The search for sealed artifacts no. 0-08 is only described verbally and never written in words. Even so, the description will be little, said Dunn with a sigh. 0-08 appears to be a common quill, but it does not need ink to write. That's all. Dunn did not dive deeper into the topic. He tugged at the golden chain on his black windbreaker and took out a gorgeous pocket watch of the same color. He clicked it open and took a glance before pointing outside. I've told you all you need to know. Go to the armory to find old Neil. Get him to arrange the documents that you need to read. He is no ordinary civilian clerk. He was once a formal member, but due to his advanced age, he failed to be promoted. His health is ailing, so it's no longer suitable for him to handle cases. Furthermore, he does not wish to become an internal keeper or rest at home. All he wishes is to be accompanied by documents and records. Okay. Klein bowed slightly as he wore his short top hat again. However, his mind was preoccupied with how sealed artifact 0-08 looked. It appears to be just your everyday quill? It writes without ink? Then what is its actual use? What makes it classified at the highest level of confidentiality that it's deemed extremely dangerous? Can it be a pen that kills anyone whose name is written? No, that would be way too heaven-defying. Sanguil wouldn't need to escape and hide away if that were the case. Just as Klein turned around to leave, Dunn suddenly shouted out to him. Hold on. I forgot something. What? Klein turned his head, his eyes puzzled. Dunn put back his pocket watch and said with a smile, later, remember to visit the accountant, Mrs. Oriana, and get an advance payment of 4 weeks. A total of £12. After that, you'll earn half your salary every week until the difference is covered. That's too much. There's no need for this, the amount should be reduced, said Klein subconsciously. He had no objection towards an advance payment. After all, he didn't even have the money needed to pay for the public horse carriage trip home. However, to receive £12 at once left him a little afraid. No, it's necessary, said Dunn as he shook his head and smiled. Think about it. Do you still wish to continue living in your present apartment? One that needs you to share a bathroom with so many other tenants? Even if you aren't taking yourself into consideration, think about the lady. Besides, he paused when he saw Klein nod in agreement. He smiled and sized up Klein's garbs and said with a meaningful intent, besides, you need a cane and you should buy a new suit. Klein was taken aback for a second before snapping back to reality. His face immediately burned with embarrassment since the suit he was wearing was cheap and of inferior quality. Typically, a top hat was made of silk, costing 5 to 6 soldi. A bow tie was 3 soldi. A walking cane inlaid with silver was 7 to 8 soldi, a shirt was 3 soldi, while pants, a vest, and tuxedo were around £7 in total. Leather boots were 9 to 10 soldi. As such, an entire suit cost more than £8 and 7 soldi. Of course, to be a presentable gentleman, one needed a watch chain, a pocket watch, and a wallet. Back then, the original Klein and Benson scrimped and saved before managing to save up a pool of money. When they went to a clothing store to check the price, they ended up running off without even bothering to try haggling. They each bought a set at a bargain shop near Iron Cross Street for a total of less than £2. It was also because of that incident that original Klein had a deep impression of the prices of clothes. Oh, okay, Klein stammered a reply. He was like the original Klein. He was someone who cared about his appearance. Dunn took out the pocket watch again and clicked it open to take a glance at it. Perhaps you should find Mrs. Oriana first? I know you'll spend quite some time at Old Neil's while Mrs. Oriana will likely be returning home soon. All right. Klein was acutely aware of his state of poverty and did not object to it. Dunn returned to the table's side and pulled at a few hanging ropes as he said, I'll get Roseanne to bring you there. The ropes began their operation as the gears ground, producing a chime from a bell at the reception area of Blackthorn Security Company. When Roseanne heard it, she hurriedly stood up and carefully made her way down. It did not take long before she appeared in front of Klein again. Dunn said humorously, I did not disturb your rest, right? Oh, bring Moretti to Mrs. Oriana. Roseanne secretly curled her lips as she answered happily. All right, Captain. Is that all? At that moment, Klein blurted out in surprise. To get his advance payment from finance, isn't there a need to get an approval letter from the captain? Shouldn't you write something? So, Dunn returned with a question. I mean, don't I need your signature to claim an advance payment from Mrs. Oriana? Klein tried his best to use simple language. Oh no, there's no need. Roseanne is enough proof. Dunn pointed at the brown-haired girl and gave a reply. Captain? It seems there's almost zero management of our finances. Klein resisted his urge to deliver a sarcastic comment before turning to leave the room with Roseanne. At that moment, he heard Dunn shout out again. Hold on. There's still another thing. Can we finish it all at once? Klein turned back with a smiling face. Yes. Dunn pressed at his temple and said, when you meet Old Neil, remember to collect 10 demon hunting bullets. Me? Demon hunting bullets? Klein returned in astonishment. Welch's revolver is still with you, right? There's no need for you to turn it in. Dunn inserted a single hand into his pocket and said, with the demon hunting bullets, if you were to face within paranormal danger, you will be able to protect yourself. It will give you some courage at the very least. There's no need for you to add on the final sentence. Just as Klein was vexing over the problem, he answered without any hesitation, all right. I'll remember to do so. This will require me to write a formal document. Wait a moment. Dunn sat down and picked up the dark red fountain pen. He scribbled a note, signed it, and stamped it. Thank you, Captain. Klein received it sincerely. He slowly walked back before turning around. Hold on. Dunn shouted one more time. Captain, you look to be in your 30s. Why do you have the symptoms of dementia? Klein squeezed out a smile and turned around to ask, anything else? I forgot earlier that you were not trained in shooting, so getting demon-hunting bullets would be useless. Let's do this. Collect 30 normal bullets every day. Take the opportunity when you are out to go to the street corner. The underground shooting range at No. 3 Zetland Street. Most of it belongs to the police department, but there is one that is specially for us Nighthawks. Oh, right, you also need to get a badge from Old Neil. Otherwise, you won't be able to enter the shooting range. Dunn smacked his forehead and took back the note from Klein. He then added the information and stamped it with another seal. A good marksman is produced by expending bullets. Do not think lightly of it. Dunn handed back Klein the modified note. Got it. Klein, who was fearful of danger, yearned to visit the shooting range that very day. He took 2 steps towards the exit before carefully turning around halfway. He deliberated before asking, Captain, is there anything else? No. Dunn nodded firmly. Klein heaved a sigh of relief and walked straight out the door. While walking, he had the strong urge to turn around to ask another, are you sure there's nothing else? He resisted that urge and finally left the keeper room successfully. Captain has always been this way. He often forgets things. As Roseanne walked by his side, she softly disparaged the captain. Even my granny has a better memory than him. Of course, he only forgets the trivial stuff. Yeah, trivial stuff. Klein, I'll call you Klein in the future. Mrs. Oriana is a very affable person. It is easy to hit it off with her. Her father is a watchsmith with excellent skill. As Klein listened to the brown-haired girl rattle on, he stepped into the stairwell and returned to the upper floor. He found Mrs. Oriana in the far office on the right-hand side. She was a black-haired woman dressed in a flounce lace dress. She appeared in her 30s and had fashionable curly hair. Her pair of green eyes were clear and smiling, and she seemed refined and elegant. After Oriana heard Roseanne repeat Dunn Smith's instructions, she took out a note and wrote an advance slip. Sign here. Do you have a seal? If not, you can leave a thumbprint. All right. Now familiar with the procedures, Klein completed the formalities. Oriana took out a copper key and opened the safe in the room. As she counted the pounds, she said with a smile, you are lucky. We have enough cash today. By the way, Klein, were you invited by Captain because you were involved in a paranormal activity and the fact that you have a specialty? Yes, you have an impeccable intuition. Klein was not stingy with his compliments. Oriana took out 4 notes with light gray backgrounds with deep black patterns printed on them. After locking the safe, she turned around and smiled. That's because I had a similar experience too. Really? Klein showed an appropriate level of surprise. Do you know about the serial killer that sent Tingen City into a frenzy 16 years ago? Oriana handed over the 4 gold pounds to Klein. Yes. It's the one which had 5 girls killed consecutively. Some had their hearts and stomachs removed by that bloody butcher. My mother often used that matter to scare my sister when we were young, said Klein as he thought about it. He received the notes and discovered that 2 of them were in 5-pound denominations and 2 of them were in 1-pound denominations. All of them had a gray background and were inked in black. The 4 corners had complicated patterns and special ink to prevent counterfeiting. The former notes were slightly bigger, and in the middle of them was Lone Kingdom's 5th king, George III's direct ancestor, Henry Augustus I. He wore a white hairband above his rotund face. His eyes were slender and he had an abnormally serious expression. However, Klein felt an indescribable sense of closeness to him. This was a 5-pound note. It's almost equal to 4 weeks of Benson's salary. In the middle of the 1-pound note was George III's father, the former king, William Augustus VI. This mighty figure had a thick mustache and a firm gaze. While he was in power, he freed the Lone Kingdom from the shackles of the old order, allowing his nation to regain the pinnacle spot. They were all good kings. Klein could faintly smell the note's ink that elated and refreshed him. Yes, if the Nighthawks had not come in time, I would have been the 6th victim. Mrs. Oriana's tone still hinted at a sense of lingering fear despite the incident having happened more than 10 years ago. I heard that the serial killer, no. The butcher was a beyonder? Klein carefully folded the paper notes and placed it in an inner pocket of his suit. Then he patted the area a few times to confirm it was there. Yes, Mrs. Oriana gave a firm nod. He had killed even more before that. The reason why he was captured was because he was preparing a ritual for the devil. No wonder he wanted different organs. Sorry, Mrs. Oriana, for making you recall such unpleasant memories, said Klein sincerely. Oriana smiled. I'm no longer afraid. I was studying accountancy in business school back then. After that incident, I've been here ever since. All right, I'll stop keeping you from what you should do. You still need to head to Old Neil's. Goodbye, Mrs. Oriana. Klein took off his hat and bowed before leaving the office. Before he went downstairs, he could not help but pat his inner pocket to make sure the 12 pounds was still there. He did a turn at a cross junction and headed right. It did not take him long to see a half-closed iron door. Knock, knock, knock. While he knocked, an aged voice sounded from inside. Come in. Klein pushed open the metal door and discovered a cramped room which only allowed for a desk and 2 chairs. There was a tightly locked iron door inside the room, and behind the desk was a hoary elder dressed in a class black robe. He was reading a few yellowed pages from a book with the illumination of a gas lamp. He raised his head and looked at the door. Are you Klein Moretti? Roseanne said you were very polite when she came over a while ago. Miss Roseanne is really a friendly person. Good afternoon, Mr. Neil. Klein took off his hat as a gesture of respect. Have a seat. Neil pointed to the silver tin can with complex flowery patterns on the table. Would you like a cup of hand-ground coffee? The wrinkles at the edge of his eyes and mouth were deeply recessed. His dark red pupils appeared slightly turbid. It doesn't seem like you drink coffee? Klein acutely noticed that Neil's porcelain cup was filled with clear water. Haha, it's a habit of mine. I do not drink coffee after 3 in the afternoon, Neil explained with a laugh. Why? Klein asked in passing. Neil held back his smile as he looked into Klein's eyes and said, I'm afraid that it would affect my sleep at night. It will make me hear the murmurings of the unknown existence. Klein was momentarily unable to answer him as he changed the subject. Mr. Neil, what documents and books should I read? As he spoke, he took out the note written by Dunn. Anything that has to do with history or are complicated and incomplete. To be honest, I have always been trying to learn, but all I can achieve is a rudimentary grasp. It's just too troublesome for the other material, such as people's diaries, contemporary books, epitaphs, etc. Lamented Neil. For example, the things I have here require more detailed historical records to determine the exact content. Why? Klein turned confused. Neil pointed to a few yellowed pages in front of him. These are from Roselle Gustav's lost diary before his death. In order to keep things secret, he used strange symbols he invented to take records. Emperor Roselle? The transmigration senior? Klein was taken aback as he immediately listened attentively. Many people believe that he did not truly die, but instead became a hidden god. Therefore, cults which revere him have always been holding various rituals to attempt at gaining power. We will occasionally encounter such incidents and obtain a few original or duplicated copies of the diary, Neil said with a shake of his head. Till date, no one has been able to decipher the special symbol's true meaning. Therefore, the Holy Cathedral has permitted us to keep copies for research, hoping that it would bring them a pleasant surprise. With that said, Neil revealed a smug smile. I have already deciphered a few symbols and have confirmed that they represent numbers. Look at what I discovered. It's actually a diary. Yes, I wish to use history from different periods, especially events that revolved around the emperor. By comparing those records to the ones written in the diary for the corresponding day, I can try to interpret more of the symbols. That's the mind of a genius, right? The old gentleman with white hair and deep wrinkles looked at Klein with bright eyes. Klein nodded in agreement. Yes. Haha, you can also take a look at it. Tomorrow, you will have to help me with this diary. Neil pushed the few yellowed pages towards Klein. Klein turned them around and took a glance at them, but it immediately stunned him. Although the symbols had been copied in terribly ugly fashion to the point of looking a little distorted, there was no way he could be mistaken. This was because they were words he was most familiar with. Chinese. And it's F*** King simplified Chinese.